Nicole, you're muted.
So nobody heard any of that. Fantastic. Thank you, Samantha. Welcome, everybody. I was just saying that I was welcoming folks in. So Samantha, Mose, Esmeralda, Sonia, so nice to see you again today. Mark, nice to see you. Mark, the other day I was recording the whole time. I was talking, and apparently you weren't hearing anything. So I think Sonia, maybe when you were here too, I'm not sure. Anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm really excited. This is the first episode of a new segment of the show I'm calling Everyday People, where I talk with everyday people who are doing really cool things. We live right now in a society, we live in a time where people are finding things to be upset about very easily, right? We look around and I mean, there's a million things that we can be upset about, but the people are also doing things that are really, really inspiring. And I think that we need to access more of that because a lot of times people think that to be so big, right? Like, oh, well, I want to do this one day. I hear that all the time. As a nomadic, full-time nomadic traveler and somebody who has always kind of walked the beat of my own drum, I get people telling me all the time what they want to do and why they can't. This is I mean, all the time. So I look for people who are doing things and want to talk about why they can, how they started, how they made the decision. It's not an easy thing. Brian and Casey, welcome to the show. Super excited to see you guys here. So today I have Samantha on. She is a homesteading mom. I'm in a Facebook group that I had seen something she posted and I just wanted to celebrate it. I thought, what an amazing woman and how fabulous that she's just like putting it out there and she's just been doing it for the pure joy of it. And I think that is extremely important that we share with people that everybody can do something for the joy of it. And when we focus on what we're doing for the joy of it, we get more joy and we attract more abundance and ease and flow and we inspire. And so I've got a lot to say about all of this, but today what I want to do is welcome Samantha on to talk with her a little bit about how she decided what to do or like how she's doing what she's doing, and also have her tell a little bit about her story and take questions from you guys. If you have any questions that you would like to ask about her experience and any advice you want, like definitely this is going to be the time. So Samantha, if you want to come on video and unmute your mic, I'd love to welcome you to the stage and we'll get started. Maybe I have to invite you to do it. I'm not sure. Let's see. Yay! And seeing you here makes me realize I am streaming. Oh, music. Okay. I'm still new to Fireside, so thank you to the Fireside pros that are here with us. You guys make it really fun. So Samantha, do you just want to start off letting people know who you are and what maybe you want to mention the post if you remember, or maybe you just want to give us something to kind of set the stage for what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, so I'm Samantha. I live in rural Pennsylvania with my family in a multi-generational home. So we have from late 70s to 11 in our household. So we're a busy home. Both my spouse and I, we work outside of the home and we're kind of your modern homesteader. We're working outside of the home, plus trying to grow our own food as much as we can where we live on our small piece of property, and to feed our family healthy options, and to do our best we can to kind of spread that wealth as well.
Outstanding. So the first thing I want to talk with you about is you've got a normal house, you're an everyday family, right? You have a small piece of property, but you're utilizing that property to feed your family. And this really inspires me because I grew up in a suburb with a father who was passionate about doing that too. So my father grew, I mean, our entire yard was all garden. And then he also rented garden plots down the road. He gardened because for him, it brought him joy. It was a stress reliever. It was a way for him to interact with nature, and it felt good for him. And then the idea of being able to make my baby food, he knew what was going into my body. He knew what he was feeding his children and his wife, and it gave him a sense of pride as well. And so growing up, that was the norm, right? Like we still went to the grocery store and all of that, but for anything that was in season, anything that could be grown, it was grown. And then my father taught me about business in that from the time I was probably 7 or 8, I was up at the pool with our little red wagon, and I had he taught us, okay, here's how we're going to do this, right? We're going to put the different vegetables in the bags and label it with the price, and you go sell it. And I just loved that. I thought it was so much fun to make people happy. You know, people would come to the pool and their kids would go play and they needed to go home for dinner. So they would come to me and they would, they'd buy their stuff, their produce, and then have me put it aside, and they'd go do their thing with their family and come back and go home and make dinner with the vegetables that my dad grew. And I just thought it was the neatest thing in the world. So tell me a little bit about when you decided, when you recognized is that this is kind of how you wanted to live it. Did you grow up with it, or where did that come from?
So I absolutely did not grow up in this kind of lifestyle whatsoever. My probably my great grandmother would have been the last person in our family that lived this life at all, had a garden, preserved. It skipped my grandmother and my mother. Completely not interested in it. And to this day, they're still pretty not interested in it, but they enjoy all of the things that I make from it since they're in the house with us. But for us, it was really kind of like it was a calling to it. We dabbled in different things. I've always liked to cook and I like nourishing my family. It's my language of love is food. So it just kind of evolved from that. And then when the world kind of went crazy and shut down and we were like, well, let's plant a garden. We have the space. We had made space in our yard for a pool, and so it opened this raw land that we had to either turn back into grass or to really grow something there. So we're like, well, let's try. It quickly escalated from a few plants to hundreds. And at some point now, I think it's thousands of things that we've grown. So it very quickly grew. We don't do anything like halfway. We're either all in or we're all out. So we were very quickly all in to growing, and then it was, well, what are we going to do with this all? We can't consume it all instantly. I mean, it comes in hard. When it's coming in, you're up to your ears in tomatoes or you're up to your ears in peppers. So it very quickly became something that, well, let's share it with our neighbors. Let's preserve something. Let's have a little farm stand. My kids have always been raised to kind of do their own thing. They've had little businesses here and there of their own. And so let's have a farm stand. Let's share it. Let's recoup some of the cost and put that right back into what we're doing next.
Very cool. So was it that COVID gave you that time that you needed to actually create it?
It gave us some more time because I had the ability to work more remotely. So there wasn't a commuting time that was running in there. And it gave us the little bit of luxury of, hey, we don't want to be running to the grocery store all the time. So let's figure out some other options.
Sure. Now, when you had the realization and you made the decision with your spouse, how long did it take before you actually saw the fruits of your labor?
Well, there's the growing season, of course. So, in where we live in Pennsylvania, the growing season is very short. And to really get a yield from it, you have to start super early. And most of our crops, things that we grow, we start from seed. So, you're starting that in February, March, and not transplanting it outside until mid May.
Awesome. Let's talk about that because I suspect that some of the people who are either here with us live or who catch the replay or listen on the podcast are going to hear these words that are very comfortable for you and I, but it's a little bit overwhelming for somebody who maybe comes from the city and who's never had an experience with gardening and to start from seed. Can you explain a
Mhm.
little bit what that means? And
Yeah.
also, how did you even figure all of the stuff out? Where did you resource prior to figuring it out?
So I may not have necessarily a background in like growing things, but my spouse, farming is in his blood essentially. Some of his family, they've dabbled, to say the least. So he had a little bit of a better understanding of how things work than I did, but my main resources were YouTube, searching the internet, going to our local library, checking things out. But to show you, I kind of have like a little show and tell I can show you. Starting from seed is literally just that. We have like a 3 ring binder here. And this is one of many that we have. So in here is where we keep all of our seeds. We have them categorized by, what it is, what we're growing. It's all put together. So starting from seed is literally having some ground soil in your home somewhere where it's warm, and you put the seed in the ground and you water it and you take care of it. It's your baby until you're transplanting it and taking that seed outside and putting it in the ground outside to grow.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, seeds, I love your binder, and that's such a great way to organize it. Thank you for showing that. Um, in case anybody's interested and is unaware, many local libraries actually have seed libraries where you can go in and they'll provide you with free seeds for planting. Sometimes these are food, often they're flowers, but just for anybody who's curious about starting to garden, starting to grow, you can definitely go to, well, not definitely if you're not in a library that does this, but you can definitely check at your library. And then there's tons of other places that you can buy seeds. And so just that's one thing I wanted to touch base on. And then I'm wondering, did you find it, so your spouse had experience, but when you started, how did you feel about it? You knew this was a thing to do. What were some of the things you went through? Did you find it super easy, really fast, everything worked out? Or how did you get the actual, because what happens is most people, they have an interest, they have an idea that they want to pursue, but they get
Mm-hmm.
stuck in a gap between the thinking and the executing. And I mean, I've been teaching podcasting since 2016, and there are still people today who I see, they're like, hey, my podcast is starting, soon. And these are people who told me in 2016 they were going to start a podcast, right? So it's we get ideas, and there's always information coming at us, and we have lots and lots of ideas of things we want to do, but our time is often limited, and sometimes we get in our head a little more than in our bodies. And so can you talk a little bit about that? The actual decision, going from decision to doing, how that.
Absolutely. So that's really like I call it analysis paralysis. We all go through it where you're like, I have all of these ideas, but where do I go? How do I start it? How can I jump in? And really it was just jumping in. We had some old seeds laying around that we started with that of course, I mean, a lot of people go to the store at the beginning of the season and they're like, oh, let's plant something, and you never actually put it in the ground. And one of the best things that I've heard, it was from Jessica at Roots and Refuge. She's a wonderful YouTuber. I've learned a lot from her. Is that 100% of the seeds that you don't plant, you're guaranteed to get nothing from it. So just get it in the ground and start something. You have 100% better chance by putting it there. So really just jump in. There's not a whole lot that can really go wrong besides it won't grow.
Awesome. And thank you for mentioning that. I love mentioning resources so people can, follow different directions and see where it leads them. Another YouTuber I want to mention is Armin. I can't think of his last name. He goes by Creative Explained, and I follow him on Instagram, so it's creative underscore explained. He's got books, he's on YouTube, and he's on the socials, and he teaches people how to grow things, start growing things from the scraps of their food. So, not to
Mm.
necessarily start from seeds, although the seeds of the actual, so you go and you get produce and you eat the produce, and then you take the seeds and you repurpose those and you grow your own food. And it's amazing and it's so easy to do. The one thing I want to encourage people to do is, if you are thinking, I'm going to grow stuff, I'm going to start testing this and growing stuff from my food, from the stuff that I buy, so I don't throw it out. That's his thing, don't throw it out. um, I want to encourage people to look for the best, highest quality food that you can. And so when you are shopping, whether that's at the grocery store or more ideally locally from growers in your local area, find out how it's being grown, right? Because you want to get the healthiest living thing to replicate. You don't want to get the junk and then like that doesn't have a lot of nutrients, got chemicals, things like that. So this is one thing I want to recommend for anybody who's thinking, wow, this is really cool. So let's talk a little bit about canning, because you preserve all this stuff. And I think that's where things get really exciting and creative for a lot of people. Yeah.
It is really exciting and creative. And that is where I struggled the most with analysis paralysis. I am a first generation canner. I had no one to tell me anything. And my spouse, he had zero experience with canning too. So here we were, like out on an island by ourselves trying to figure this out. And I just dug in again with YouTube. There's a wealth of knowledge there. Our local library, any kind of book that I could get my hands on, really. And some of the best resources I would say for canning have, for starters, are like the Ball book. They give you the basis to grow an understanding yourself of what is safe to can, of what is not safe to can. And then ultimately, it's your kitchen, and you have to decide what you're comfortable with. I remember sitting at our kitchen island and going, can I really do this? Am I really going to be able to put all of this ingredients in here? And I'm very comfortable in the kitchen. I have always cooked. Like I said, it's like my love language. And I was overwhelmed. And I was just like, well, here goes nothing. We're going to try this. And I will never forget the first thing I ever canned was sweet pepper relish. And it was something that, on a scale of like super easy to difficult, it was like as easy as I could get. It was like a foolproof kind of thing, very safe to do. It's a water bath recipe. And so once I did it, I was like, well, that's not so bad. Well, I can do this. Look at how cool this looks in the jar. I was like so excited with it. And then it was like, you grow this confidence. You're not just growing your vegetables and your fruits, you're growing your skills and your confidence. And so it just snowballed from there. And here we are around 2 years later, and I've canned thousands of jars, fruits and vegetables and meals in jars and soups and stocks and stuff for our dogs. You name it, I've probably canned it or have it on my list of things to can. And it's so rewarding now to be able to go to our little grocery store in our house and pick up these jars of things that I've made. I have one here actually. This was these are hot cherry pepper poppers. This is one of my spouse's favorite things. And some of the exciting things, I don't know if you can see this or not, but I get to create our own labels for our jars. So pretty neat that, from start to finish, we grew these peppers, we harvested them, we know exactly what went into it, we preserved it, so I know exactly what's in this jar. And then I get to design a little label to go on the top. So from start to finish, this is us. And there's not a lot that we do in our world anymore that you can say that. So it's
True.
pretty cool.
Definitely cool. What are some of your favorite things to can, and what are your least favorite things to can?
So some of my favorites, being that I like to cook, I like to be in the kitchen, are like ingredient based things. I like to have sauce. I like to have protein. I like to have things that I can take and create something else with. Some of my least favorite and my family's least favorite so far has been like ground beef based products, like a meat sauce or just like a beef in general. We're not very fond of the texture of it after. I mean, certainly it's sustaining and something that we can have, and we have consumed the products that I've made, but they weren't our favorites. So we really like to have those different ingredients to be able to create other meals from.
Awesome. So you mentioned protein, which makes me want to ask you about the chickens because you also have chickens at
We
your
do.
home, right?
Yeah.
And how did this come to be? And also, when you talk about that, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what having chickens means because I was actually looking before I went nomadic. I was looking at I really wanted a couple of hens as pets, and to lay eggs. And I'm single, so I didn't need much, and I had a very small property. Um, and I thought it's just perfect for like little yard chickens. So I made the decision not to do it because it would have made me not be able to live my lifestyle the way I'm living it now. And
Mhm.
so some people raise chickens for food, that's the egg and the bird, and some people only for the eggs and all kinds of things. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why chickens, how you're doing it, what the benefit is, and if there is anything that you would have done different if you were starting from scratch again.
So chickens are like the gateway homestead animal, I understand. And it's very true because before we even decided to live this lifestyle, we had chickens. My youngest wanted chickens. She got the experience of going on a farm and collecting fresh eggs, and she was so into it. And so I would say it's probably 5 years ago now, for her birthday, we decided we were going to get 10 chickens. And I went onto like this really fancy website and picked the chickens I wanted. And we got a little chicken coop, and one chicken survived out of the 10. So it was heartbreaking and a learning experience, and not at all what we expected it to be. And we still have that one chicken. Her name is Pixie. She's a little frizzle bantam, tiny little thing. And she's like the boss of all of the other chickens still to this day. But right now we have about 30. We have them for egg production. We don't harvest the meat. They're not meat chickens. The eggs we consume, our dogs consume as well because we have 6 dogs. And we do a lot of baking and things like that with the chickens. But chickens are a lot of work. It's time consuming. You do have to make sure that you are able to feed and water them daily or have someone else to do it. They are messy. So you need to have the proper setup. And if I look back to our original setup, not at all right. Not at all right. And you learn. We very quickly learned we were not set up appropriately, and now we are. My spouse built a large coop for them as well as an enclosed run to protect them from predators, so they can kind of range freely within their safe space. And we do have it set up now for collecting of eggs and all of that. We did when we invested in this batch of chickens. We bought them very cheap just to be egg layers. There was nothing designer about the chickens that we purchased. And that was okay because they're hardy. They're giving us the what we need from them, the eggs. And it is a source for us to give our scraps. Nothing goes to waste on our home anymore. If we're not consuming it or our dogs aren't consuming it, the chickens or our ducks are getting it. So it goes full circle. Food waste becomes eggs, which that also becomes fertilizer for our crops. So it all keeps going.
I love that. I think that is so important to discuss. And there's a term called regenerative agriculture. And this is something that a lot of people really don't understand where's their food coming from. And then when their food is coming, even if they realize, oh, it comes from a farm, it's actually an animal. It's not, it doesn't just arrive in this like package, it's actually an animal. I think a lot of people don't understand how animals are raised for food in America, and don't understand the consequences of eating food that has been raised, mm, with with
Not the best
not
condition.
naturally, yeah. Not naturally. And so there's a very the awareness is becoming more and more prevalent, with homesteaders especially, and people who are thinking, I want to take control of how my family eats, what goes into our body, and what we are also cost, right? I mean, it costs money to raise animals, but
Mhm.
in the long term, you're really, it's not, right. So if you're paying 50 cents to 75 cents per egg, or a dollar an egg for a healthy egg sometimes, right, you're not paying that when you have your own chickens. But it does take time. It's an investment, and it's a long term thing. But I think that is so super important to talk about, that nothing goes to waste, and that we, as Americans, North Americans, we have consumed so much and we waste so much that actually is not necessary. And I love that you also talked, I think you mentioned before, yeah, that the food, it goes, to the dogs, to the chickens, to the it's so you're it's the complete life cycle of everything grown, everything raised, coming from birth to death and regenerating life again and again and again.
Yeah, absolutely. We do our best. I mean, our culture that we live in is consumers. We buy and buy and buy, and food waste is a huge problem. And there's so many people out there that are starving, that are going hungry, that don't have a meal. I mean, we live in an area specifically that isn't a high income. There's a lot of poverty around us. And I know that my children have experienced other children that don't have that food on the table when they go home. And as a society, we need to do better. And choosing to live this life has allowed us to have a better touch. I remember when my oldest was just a little toddler and she was having a chicken nugget and she goes, "What is this?" And I'm like, "It's chicken." And I remember the look on her face. She was like, "Walk walk chicken?" Like she was like devastated when she realized that that actually came from a chicken. Now mind you, she's 15 years old now and she has a full understanding and appreciation of where her food comes from, but that's not how it is as a society that we are in anymore. People have a huge disconnect going to the grocery store and picking up a piece of meat, a package of meat, and realizing that this came from a living, breathing animal. And how was that animal treated?
And I think that that is a really, another important point that I want to touch on. But before I do, I just want to say welcome, Stephanie. It looks like we've got a couple more people in the room. And if you guys have any questions for Samantha, definitely let me know. We'd love to interact and have you come ask your question, and get some insight from the lady who is doing it. So, when I was probably 12, I want to say, I became a vegetarian because I learned about, well, it started before that, but I learned, at the time, L'Oreal, was using rabbits to test makeup. And so that like came as such a shock to me, like that animals were being, used for science. Like I that was like the opening. I was probably like, I don't know, 10 or 11 or something. And then like I learned about the monkeys and all the different things. And I was just really like, oh, this is horrible. And then I realized, but I'm eating the animals. And so I'm bad if I'm hurting the animals. I'm killing the animals to eat. Now, I never had a problem with fish or with crabs, because growing up in Maryland on the Eastern Shore, my dad taught me to fish. My dad taught me to crab. And so I understood what the process was, and we got things that were wild, and I understood the whole cycle.
Mhm.
But when it came to, you know, quack quack and, moo moo and all the animals that would walk among the earth, and I didn't have a personal experience with that. To me it was like harm, 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 harm. And I think that a lot of people still think that is the thing, that killing an animal um, is causing the animal pain. And while I'm not going to get into, yeah, everybody's opinion is their own and is right for them, but I do think that there's value in understanding how things are raised. And so I've really enjoyed over the last number of years to be in community with farmers who are regenerative, agriculturally minded, and who actually name their animals, and who talk about, here's how we kill, and here's how, and it's for the least pain to the animal, giving them the best life. And since I started eating more intentionally, a lot of times I don't eat organic because for a lot of farmers the cost to get that organic isn't sustainable. Not only that, that organic doesn't necessarily mean super healthy. So I mean, the media is what really influences everything that we believe and that we do. And so I would encourage people also to get a little curious about the food that you eat, in terms of when you're eating animal products, where are those animal products coming from? How are they living? Because if they're living in like a little box their entire life and they're being shot up with stuff, like, that's mass, that's commercial farming essentially. And when you start eating things that were raised with love and that were appreciated and that were killed with love, and whether that's prayer, what, everybody's different, right? Whatever you believe, but there's a completely different, number one, flavor. Animals who are treated well and and don't die in fear, but there's just so much to do that. I don't even go into it, but there's definitely a different flavor and there's a different feeling. And gosh, 20 some years ago, when I was doing school for coaching, I learned about Dr. Yamoto and the work that he did with water. And for anybody who's not familiar with that, I think it's called Messages from Water or something like that. There's a book or something about it. They talk about it in What the Bleep Do We Know, which is a movie that was made. But we've scientists have proven that when you charge water with the energy of love, with the energy of growth, with the energy of peace, literally just touching the vessel and intending that. The prayer, right? This is why a lot of religions use prayer over food and before they eat, and they give thanks for the abundance and the bounty. The water, when crystallized and looked at under a microscope, it's beautiful prisms. And when they took the water and gave it energy and words of hate and of violence and of terror, and the water crystallization was very, very ugly. And so it has been proven scientifically, it's not just all woo woo, that what we put into what we consume comes into us. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to go off on a like a whole thing on that, but I think it's really important to understand where food comes from, how was it raised, also vegetables, and what is the soil when we're eating something that's coming from very young soil that has just been like, that hasn't really been given nutrients and cared about. It's a very different vegetable or fruit than soil that has intentional permaculture focused on it with all that. Yay, somebody wants to speak. We're going to bring you on in just a sec, but first I just want to ask Samantha, you have any things to share about any of that?
Oh, we could have a week-long conversation about this. But like, the proof is in the pudding to me. You know, you can hear about this all you want, but until you actually experience it yourself, you don't truly understand. But since we have started this intentional way of living, producing our own food, we have had to dispatch some of our chickens. That has happened, and we made sure that none of it went to waste. But our job is to make sure that they have the best life during their life. Same with our plants. You'll often find me in the garden talking to my pepper plants and telling them how wonderful they are and they can grow. I treat them the same way that I treat my children. You breathe life into them and they give you so much back. But for me, the real proof in the pudding is my family. Seeing now, eating almost all of our meals from home, from scratch, knowing what goes into it, how we feel after we've eaten it, and then when we're traveling or we're being forced to go out to a restaurant, even, not fast food. I'm not saying fast food because that's a whole other story, but in a real sit down restaurant and consuming food outside of our home, how much different we feel afterwards, how just not well. By the second or third day of a vacation, if we're somewhere where we can't have our own homemade food, we're like, oh, I feel awful. I just don't feel good. The proof's in the pudding.
Indeed. Well, I thought that there was a question, but it was just a message thanking you. Somebody had to leave early. If anybody would love to speak, share your own thoughts and opinions, please signal to us that you'd like to speak. And otherwise, Samantha, I'm just going to turn it over to you for anything that maybe you'd like to share that we haven't gotten to yet, and then we'll just wrap it up for today.
So I hope it's okay if I share what we've just launched. Nicole actually has given me the boost I needed because I really enjoy sharing what we do. And I like what goes into the scenes, behind the scenes, taking the pictures and sharing and really creating something beautiful. And that's why I was posting on the Facebook group. So we've now launched our own YouTube and Facebook page. We're Coal Country Homestead. So there's a lot of exciting things that are going to happen there. I don't have any videos out there yet, but they are sure to come. Some of the things that I have here that I would like to share, if it's okay, and if we have some time, is like I mentioned about like the ball book is a great start for beginners for like water bathing. This has been, a great resource to me. It's kind of beat up because I use it. Also, there is for pressure canning, which is a whole other ball game. One of my favorite things is the complete guide to pressure canning. There's so many great resources in here. And just really to encourage people to try. I am always open to answering any questions. I laugh a lot of the times when I post things in canning groups and homesteading groups. Like I say, I break my Facebook because all of a sudden it's like ding, 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 ding. I get all of these questions coming in. And I do take the time to try and answer any question that's presented to me. After my initial post of our 1,000+ jar pantry that I shared, I took all of the questions that I received and went back into Facebook and made an even longer post trying to answer all of the questions of how we do it and we do live, real life outside of our home too. So there are a lot of early nights, or I should say early mornings and late nights and long weekends that do go into this living this lifestyle. And we do have very busy harvest season, but you do also have those quiet times and like the fall and winter that we're in right now, where you kind of get to reflect and enjoy all of the hard work that went in. And this by no means has tied us to our home either, that we can't travel. We enjoy traveling. We love to camp. So you find a balance of what works for you and what really, what's right for your family or for you as an individual. And not everyone that we know understands the life that we live either. And that's okay. That's their opinion. But we're living the best life that we can for us. And I hope to encourage others to give it a shot if it's something that they're interested in, or to just, encourage you to get out there and learn more. Like I've said, YouTube is a great resource. There's so many great creators on there. I know I mentioned like Roots and Refuge, there's Homesteading Family, the Justin Rhodes family, as well as like Make It Make. She's another Pennsylvania creator. She's opened my eyes to a lot of different canning possibilities and techniques. So there's just
Awesome.
so much at our fingertips that you can really learn anything you want.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, I have another question before we wrap up. And again, if anybody wants to ask any questions or comment, definitely let me know. Um, you work full time and outside of the home, as does your spouse. Kids, I imagine, go to regular school. They're not homeschooled, eh?
They are not homeschooled. They go. I do have one that's she does online, and another that does go in person, just because they have their own individual needs. But we do work full time outside of the house in completely unrelated fields.
And so how do you feel obviously it's additional time and effort that you have to put in, but you do have normally busy lives anyhow. You have children, you have parents, you have all the things. So what do you have any tips for people who would like to start living a more intentional life and creating their own food at home, even if just on a balcony? I mean, you can use containers, you can use windowsills, even in an apartment. You can start growing things. You may not be able to replace your grocery shopping, but even just starting out, is there do you have any tips that you would recommend for anybody curious about getting started in homesteading?
Sure. You mentioned like free resources for seeds. So if there's anyone in like Pennsylvania, Penn State, the college, the university, they actually have a free seed program. They have a website where you can go and see any seeds that are available. You write them, they send them to you, no cost. That was one of the great resources that got us started. Um, but yeah, you can absolutely on a balcony, on a windowsill, grow some parsley, grow some chives, start small. You can grow in any kind of container. Really, we've utilized so many things, and repurposed. We try and repurpose and do things as cheaply as possible. Most of the stuff that we've built has been reused materials, and lumber so expensive, so that's important. And shopping sales even at your grocery store if you don't have the ability to grow yourself, or looking for like a salvage grocery store in your area. Sometimes you can buy like seconds, and seconds really are just the produce that isn't beautiful by our modern standards. It looks a little bruised or bumped up, but it tastes just as good. um, so there's a lot of resources out there. You just have to look for them, and not be scared to jump in.
Stephanie, thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure, and I'm really excited for everybody that came. Thank you guys so much, Casey, Stephanie, Sonia, Mark, Esmeralda, Mose. Thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun. The first of Everyday People won't be the last. So thank you, Fireside. Thank you to the listeners at home on the podcast. And thank you, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me. Good luck, everyone.